Namaste to all of you. On behalf of the Center for Indic Studies, Indus University, Ahmedabad, and the Gandhi Research Foundation, Jalgaon, I welcome you all to this webinar. We have all gathered here today to celebrate the conclusion of the year-long birth centenary celebrations of Shri Dharampal ji, whose dates are 1922 to 2006. He initiated many seekers on the path of rediscovering India, as this session is titled. As many of you are already aware, the Gandhi Research Foundation, GRF Jalgaon, and the Center for Indic Studies, Indus University, Ahmedabad, have been jointly organizing a year-long webathon to commemorate the birth centenary of Sri Dharampal ji. A series of sessions have been organized on the theme of revitalizing India, with the focus on the contributions of Dharampal ji and its relevance for current day India. The 10 sessions were organized starting from 24th of July 2021 through this August 2022. And today is the final, that is the 11th session in this series of monthly webinars. These webinars are centered, they have been focused on various important works authored by Dharampal ji. Like Dharampal ji's works, these webinars were focused on a wide range of topics that included ranging from Indian science and technology, medicine, education, village communities, and civil movements to the philosophical underpinnings of Indian culture. In these webinars that were spread across this whole 1 year, various eminent experts, many whom are present with us today, belonging to various disciplines, have been discussing Dharampal ji's work and its relevance for their respective subject areas. This year-long webathon that consisted of more than 10 sessions was organized in collaboration with various esteemed national institutions, including the Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, Indian Council for Historical Research, the Indian Council of Social Science Research, and Indian Council of Philosophical Research. I warmly welcome the various dignitaries and esteemed guests who are gracing this occasion today. I will now invite Professor Geeta Dharampal ji, daughter of Shri Dharampal ji, for this special event to give us a brief introduction and to warmly welcome the guests present today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ankur Kakkar. My connection is becoming unstable, so I will keep it only on audio so that at least you can hear me. I hope I am audible. Am I audible?
Yes,
yes. So, you're audible.
Yes. Yeah. Namaskar to all of you, and my very warm welcome also on behalf of the Gandhi Research Foundation in Jalgaon to our audience, and especially to our three panelists, Srimati Indumati Kadare, Shri Kanaga Savapati, and Shri Harsh Satya, for our today's concluding session of a year-long webathon celebrating the contribution of Dharampal ji's in his birth centenary year. My special greetings to our hosts and sincere thanks to them, to Dr. Ram Sharma and to Dr. Ankur Kakkar from the Center for Indic Studies, for all the unstinting commitment and dedication that they have shown during the course of the last year. Now, that our concluding session should focus on a slim collection of essays entitled Rediscovering India may seem somewhat incongruous, maybe not so appropriate, but our aim becomes clear through the second part of the session's title, namely to revitalize India by taking forward Dharampalji's legacy. But how do we do this? Namely to revitalize India by taking forward Dharampalji's legacy. This important task is going to be discussed by our eminent panelists, all three of whom are intimately familiar with Dharampalji's work and greatly appreciate its significance. As for the book, Rediscovering India, its slimness is deceptive. Actually, it constitutes a seminal collection of essays and speeches, 28 to be precise, extending over more than 4 decades, from 1956 to 1998. Thematically, too, these essays, speeches, and interviews discuss a wide spectrum of issues. Let me just briefly familiarize you with its contents. Divided into 3 sections, the first section, entitled Indian Society and the Beginning of European Dominance and the Process of Impoverishment, that is, of India, deals with the foundational basis, the rationale for Dharampalji to take up his meticulous historical research, first to discover and understand how well Indian society was functioning at the eve of the British conquest, so around the middle of the 18th century. And then secondly, to reveal the intricate British strategies by which India got destroyed, dismembered, disfigured within the course of 100 to 150 years. The erosion of norms and dignity and the question of backwardness are 2 crucial essays that trace the disastrous transformation that took place in the 19th century. The second section, entitled Problems Faced by India After the End of European Dominance, brings us face to face with the post-colonial dilemma, especially during the Nehruvian years. But many issues and questions raised in these essays still need to be tackled as we celebrate Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav in India's independence Diamond Jubilee year. Finally, the third section, some European characteristics and their worldwide manifestations, underscores the destructive nature of European expansion across the globe since 1500. But it also indicates ways in which India and other non-Western nations may extricate herself or themselves from Western influence. This reorientation, literally, to looking east is certainly most relevant today in the 21st century, which has been heralded as the Asian century. So you see, this little unassuming book, first published in 2003, contains a lot of gems, jewels. It's a treasure trove for us not only to rediscover India, but also to reorient ourselves, to unlearn and free ourselves from indoctrinated rhetoric so that we can at long last attain our intellectual Swaraj. And this is the reason why this precious book has been reprinted in Dharampalji's birth centenary year and made available in a larger font so that the present volume is no longer that slim. It's quite a sizable volume now. To conclude these opening remarks, let me cite the words of the editor, Pavan Gupta, who unfortunately can't be with us today, from the book's preface. I quote, "At a deeper level, the book prepares us to formulate some serious questions that we should be asking ourselves today. The narratives and dating systems that we need to challenge today, the areas and directions that we need to examine and follow, the kind of research that we need to undertake today, all these will go a long way to rejuvenate India once again. End of quote. In other words, to revitalize India. So now the floor is open for our panel discussion that will discuss how we are to revitalize India, taking forward Dharampalji's legacy. And it will be moderated by Dr. Ankur Kakkar. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Geeta Dharampalji, for giving us these wonderful opening remarks. I now invite the Director for Center for Indic Studies, Professor Ram Sharma ji, to briefly summarize the webathon that was held so far. Thank you.
Okay, Namaste Ankur. Thank you. सबसे पहले मैं सादर प्रणाम करूंगा इंदुमती ताई को जो हमारे साथ में आज उपस्थित हैं. हमारे गेस्ट हर्ष जी, उनका भी स्वागत करना चाहूंगा. कनक सभापति जी, he has always been a very fine mentor for us for many years now. MS श्री राम जी, उनका भी स्वागत करना चाहूंगा जो हमारे गुरु रहे हैं इस पूरे अभियान में 1 वर्ष के लिए. धर्मपाल जी ने जो वर्क किया, जो लेगेसी हमारे लिए रखी सामने, उसको कुछ शब्दों में रखा नहीं जा सकता. 2 शब्द जो हमें ध्यान में आते हैं, और अभी जो 75वां अमृत महोत्सव मनाया जा रहा है, उसमें एक बात पे बहुत एम्फेसिस किया जा रहा है ताकि हमारे जो विद्यार्थी हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं आज और जो फैकल्टी जुड़े हैं उनके लिए भी महत्वपूर्ण होगा कि हमें स्वाधीनता से स्वतंत्रता की ओर अब जाना होगा. और इसमें अंतर भी हमें समझना होगा कि हमें स्वाधीनता तो मिल गई, like physically we have become independent, but our colonization has gone so deep into our bones that कि हमें स्वतंत्रता अभी तक नहीं मिल पाई. तो वैचारिक स्वतंत्रता अगर किसी ने दिलाने का हमें मार्गदर्शन किया और बहुत सारे पॉइंटर्स हमारे सामने छोड़े, उनमें धर्मपाल जी शीर्ष स्थान पर हैं. क्योंकि जब अंग्रेज आए और उन्होंने ये जो सब हमारे एलिगेशंस पुट किए और कॉलोनाइजेशन के तौर पे ये कहा कि हम तो पिछड़े हैं, हम बारबेरिक हैं, हम प्रिमिटिव हैं, और इंडिपेंडेंस के बाद हमारी मनोस्थिति ऐसी हो चुकी थी कि हम इसको इम्बाइब भी कर चुके थे कि हाँ ये सत्य है. तो धर्मपाल जी ने अपने डेकेड्स ऑफ रिसर्च जो उन्होंने करी है, कई दशकों की जो रिसर्च करी है, उससे ये प्रूव किया कि ऐसा नहीं है, सत्य इसके बिल्कुल विपरीत है. और इन्हीं वर्क्स को हमने एक एक करके हर महीने डिस्कस किया उनकी birth centenary पे. So coming to the programs that we have done so far, because this is concluding session and we started in almost 1 year back. So our first session was on 21st August. It was on evaluating India's historical achievements in the domain of science and the implications for contemporary India. And we had very illustrious speakers joining us on that day. Professor MS Shri, who is here, he inaugurated that program with his study of Indian astronomy and its relevance today. And it was very important because one thing that was alleged on us, that we were never scientific and we never discovered, science, mathematics. We were always illogical, spiritual. So that was, of course, taken up by Dharampalji in his work, Indian Science and Technology, and followed by his illustrious disciples like MS Shri Ramji, K. Ramasubramaniam ji, and MD Srinivas ji. So our first session was taken up by them, and Ramasubramaniam ji discussed about historiography of the Kerala School of Mathematics and Astronomy, where he discussed about how we discovered calculus and how it went from India to other parts of the world. Then MD Srinivas ji talked about the state of sciences and higher learning in the 18th century India. So this was the first session that we did in August. And the second session was on India's historical achievements in technology and their contemporary relevance. It was taken up by, I think there were 2 parts of the one session. Okay. and because we wanted to discuss the science as well as technology, because Dharampalji showed us the way to rediscover our science and technology both. So in the technology part, we invited A.V. Balasubramaniam ji, who talked about traditional Indian iron and steel making. And India was known for that for centuries. Okay. Only thing is, it was never taught in Indian schools and colleges, and it was completely sidelined or marginalized. So he established the facts related to the steel manufacturing in India and how it was exported from India till modern times. Then Darshan Shankarji talked about Ayurveda and global future of health sciences, where he discussed that even in 21st century, we have sciences that we are far ahead from Western sciences, and Ayurveda is one among them. Then P. Ram Manoharji in the same session talked about the global rediscovery of Ayurveda in the modern world, where he highlighted the main texts and the great acharyas of Ayurveda in India. Then coming to the third session that we had on 25th September 2021, revitalizing indigenous knowledge and production towards Atmanirbhar Bharat, where Anil Gupta ji talked about his much acclaimed honeybee network experience, that how indigenous knowledge still exists, is still thriving. We just need to tap into that. We had another speaker in the same session, Vijay Lakshmi ji, a research director, Center for Indian Knowledge System, Chennai. She talked about building on traditional knowledge and resources for sustainable agriculture. She covered, the historical overview of Indian agriculture, scope and purpose of Vriksha Ayurveda, which again is never talked in our schools and colleges. Okay, so that was the third session. The fourth session we held on 30th October, and it was on civil disobedience and Indian tradition, historical significance and contemporary implication. It was taken up by Professor Satish Jain and Professor Shambhu Prasad ji. Professor Satish Jain talked about significance of Dharampal's work for understanding the concepts of the rule of law and legitimacy in Indian tradition, where he talked about civil disobedience and Indian tradition, and how it has been part and parcel of Indian tradition for centuries. Dharampalji, or going back to Mahatma Gandhi, they just revived it back, or they put it in focus. So Satishji talked about that. Then Shambhu Prasadji talked about civil disobedience again and Indian tradition, how it is connected and how it can be used as a positive tool, powerful tool to mobilize and channelize voices from the ground. Okay. Then we had another session on 27th November, where we invited Dr. J.K. Bajajji to talk about, I think, one of the most acclaimed book of Dharampalji, The Beautiful Tree, Indigenous Indian Education in the 18th Century. And Bajajji, I think, very thoroughly pointed out the research done by, or research compiled by Dharampalji, that what kind of education system we had in 18th century, who were learning there, who were educating at that time. So quantity, quality, both aspect of that Bajajji talked about. And then we had another session 6th on 18th December, how to make the new education policy viable for youth in tomorrow's world. And we had this discussion with two eminent panelists, Sahana Singh ji and Michelle Denino ji. And Michelle Denino ji talked about how National Education Policy 2020 is trying to revive back indigenous education system, or trying to bring back that into mainstream education. Then another session we had on 18th January 2022, understanding Gandhi's historical contribution and contemporary relevance. That session we had with Arvindan Neelkandanji, Golanapallai Prasadji, and Raghuram Rajuji, where they talked about, because this is Gandhiji was guru of Dharampalji, and whatever Dharampalji did, it was inspired by, or the challenge taken up by Gandhiji against Britishers' allegation that we were uneducated, we were primitive, and it is British who civilized us. So Arvindan Neelkandanji and Gulanapalli Prasad and Raghuram Rajuji talked about what was the role of Gandhi in reviving back and making us understand that how much civilized, educated, and well we were contributing in science and technology when British when they came here. Then next session we had on 19th Feb on Dharampal's birth centenary celebration, the same day, with book release and greetings from his close associate. And the book was The Essential Writings of Dharampal. And we were joined by more than 10 eminent speakers, activists, educationists across India to celebrate his centenary and to release this book also. Ninth session was on Bharatiya Chitta Manas and Kala, and it was taken up by Professor Bharat Gupta and Shri Pawan Gupta ji. And this book talks about the essence or the philosophy of Indian civilization in totality, that what makes Indian mind what it is today, how it has been shaped, who shaped it, how is it so resilient after so many invasions, and what inherent strengths are there which can help us rebuild India again in 21st century. Then the last session previous to this one, we had on 23rd April, local communities in the village economy, which was taken up by Dr. Nandita Krishnan. And of course, we invited also Kanak Savapati ji, but due to pure connectivity, he could not complete its session at that time. So Nandita Krishnan ji talked about the sacred ecology of India, her much acclaimed work on, sacred gurus around India, and how it can help us face climate crisis or the environmental challenge today. And she also mentioned that how she got inspired from Dharampal ji's work in reviving this indigenous tradition. And of course, we had Dr. Sudarshan Iyengar ji talking about the village economy at the same time. So it was wonderful journey. Overall, we had 10 sessions so far. This is 11th one, the concluding session. And it has been like going through each and every aspect of what Dharampal ji and how Dharampal ji tried to reclaim the intellectual heritage or the cultural heritage of India through his decades of research work. And we try to connect with the students, faculties in Indus, across Indus, and we try to spread this message through our YouTube channel also. And I would like to thank, by concluding, this journey of 1 year, and thanking all our great speakers, activists, educationists who joined us in last 12 months. And of course, a big thank to Geeta Dharampal ji, who has been guiding us for all these sessions, continuously mentoring us about how to organize this, as well as how to make it intellectually stimulating as well. Thank you, Geeta ji. Thank you, everyone, for this.
Thank you, Professor Ram Sharma ji, for these wonderful remarks. Now, without wasting much time, I would now like to invite our very special guest today, Professor P. Kanak Savapati ji, who needs no introduction, but I'll still introduce him for this session. So, Dr. P. Kanak Savapati ji is a professor and former director of Tamil Nadu Institute of Urban Studies, Coimbatore. He is a professor, author, writer, and social worker. He is known for his pioneering field studies in industrial and business clusters in different parts of the country. He is involved in studying the Indian economic, social, business, and management systems from the native perspectives. Without wasting much time, sir, I warmly welcome you to this webinar. And now I will hand it over to you.
So a very warm good morning to all of you, esteemed guests, respected Madam Geeta Dharampal ji, my dear sister Indumati Tai, Shri Harsh Satya ji, Professor M.S. Shri Ram sir, my dear Shri Ram Sharma, Ankur, and dear participants. I feel extremely happy to participate in this final session, Rediscovering India, Revitalizing India, organized by the Gandhi Research Foundation and the Indus University. I am one of those who are influenced by the respected Dharampal ji. During the late 90s, when we were in Chennai at the Center for Policy Studies, discussing about the native Indian wisdom. When he came to know, that was the first time I got introduced to him. When he came to know that we were taking up field studies, he advised me to take up studies relating to the Jatis, communities. Of course, earlier, Shri as Gurumurthy was also motivating me. So he told me that these communities have enormous strengths. You have to study. And later, over the years, till almost 2006, we used to meet, particularly during the final years when he was in Coimbatore, Arya Vaidya Pharmacy. Shri Michal Denino and myself used to go meet him, spent long hours discussing about the progress of our field studies, and he used to advise. So I am one of those fortunate people who was mentored by Shri Dharampal ji. And today, I am here to share some of my points in a limited way in about 15-20 minutes on these communities, Jatis. Jatis even today remain very powerful. Jatis are close-knit. That doesn't mean that they do not integrate with others. In the Bharatiya civilization, even today, Jatis interact closely with each other. This we can visibly see in, particularly some of us, we are involved in taking up studies relating to economy, business, and to an extent, society also. So we notice this close relationship among Jatis at the social and at the economic business level even today. And when we see the society as a whole, we see the role for different communities, including the so-called scheduled caste communities. Some of us, when we visit the temples, particularly in Tamil Nadu, we have seen the role for each and every communities, including the different scheduled caste communities without any discrimination. This we have seen in many places. As far as the economics field is concerned, I can say that it is the Jatis, communities that are taking India forward in the last 50, 60 years through their close-knit relationship, one within the community and second among the communities also. So these communities exhibit their strengths through what we call today as social capital. The social capital is the tendency or the natural ability to move with others as one of their own men, women. So this social capital helps our country basically in two ways. One is economic progress, and second one is social peace. If we say economic progress, we have seen that these Jatis are helping the entrepreneurship to grow in different parts of the country. So whether it is Surat or Ludhiana or Belgaum or Shivakasi or Coimbatore, in different parts of the country, entrepreneurship is largely driven today by these communities. That too, if we see closely, we can come to know that it is the agricultural communities, what we call new business communities, that are driving the economic development, business development of India during the last 30 to 40 years. Of course, these business communities, they have a role, they are doing well, but these Jatis from agricultural background, they are new business communities or new industrial communities. They are doing extremely well because of their close relationships. And second, they have the ability, natural ability to mobilize their people for, say, fundraising or even for innovation purposes. So for different purposes, as a result of which the economic development of India has been happening at a very faster rate. And we have also seen as to how these communities play a major role in social development, maintaining the social peace, at the same time enabling the social progress as a whole. I'll just give a few examples, one or two brief examples in the next 15 minutes, and then conclude my speech. If we see India after independence, we all know at the time of independence, India was largely a poor completely because of the destruction of the native system by the colonial powers. So, as a result of which, we remained a poor nation. But in the last 70 years, if we see, so in the last 60 plus years, it is these communities that have been driving the economic development of India. There are about 3,000, 4,000 industrial business centers in India. Most of these centers are driven by these communities. You take, for example, a place called Shivakasi in Tamil Nadu. Shivakasi was a very small place, a big village some 70 years back. And the people over there, they were very ordinary people from the agricultural communities. They were Palmyra climbers. They climbed the tree and then get the toddy. So that was their work. But they wanted to progress in life. So they entered the match industry in the 1940s, particularly 50s. And over a period of 20 years, they just began to dominate the matchmaking industry, but also entered into this firecrackers business and also the printing industry. Diversification was taking place naturally. So our communities have enormous economic and business wisdom. No management school went there and told them that you have to diversify from matchbox manufacturing to firecrackers manufacturing, from matchboxes and firecrackers to printing works. Because in those days, they were getting all these boxes and then these posters from Mumbai and Chennai. So one of them thought, why don't we enter into printing industry? And that is how they entered. And today, about 30 to 35% of India's offset printing works, sophisticated offset printing works, takes place there. At one point of time, they were dominating the entire firecracker industry with a share of 90%. Even today, it will be about 60%. Similarly, in the match industry, their share was about 70%. Now it will be about 45 to 50%. So even when Jawaharlal Nehru was alive in 1960s, he called Shivakasi a mini Japan. This Shivakasi employs 5 lakh people, completely promoted by the local people without any outside help. And this is similar is the case if you take Belgaum in Karnataka, or Surat, or Rajkot in Gujarat, or Ludhiana in Punjab, or Kanpur and other places in Uttar Pradesh. Similar case. This is because these communities, particularly the ordinary people from these communities, after they got political independence, they thought they should do something. So they entered into different businesses. And in those days, based on the opportunities that they got, they entered into those businesses and then they've developed businesses. In fact, it will be interesting to see to see the background of these businesses, entry into these businesses. Today in Tamil Nadu, there are 2 transport clusters, Sangagiri and Namakkal. These are India's number 1 and number 2 largest transport clusters in India. And how did this transport industry develop 50 years back in the 1960s? This is because in those days, in the Salem region, middle central part of Tamil Nadu, betel nut leaves used to be exported to places like Mumbai, other parts of India. So bullock carts used to carry these betel nut leaves from the farms to the railway station. One of those people thought, it is very difficult to carry leaves through bullock cart. So why don't we buy a lorry? Those days, lorries were not there. So one of them thought, he combined 2-3 people, they purchased a lorry. And today, Sangagiri and Namakkal are the 2 largest transport clusters in India. And this is how business will have developed. Similarly, in Rajkot, I remember when we were there, they told us this background in the 1960s when Saurashtra region was facing difficulties due to lack of water. They were all using diesel engines. And one of those Patels started repairing a diesel engine because there was some problem. He assembled it, disassembled it, and it was working. Then he thought, why don't we make our own machines? That is how he invited two people to join together, and they started making machines. And within a period of few years, their sales were increasing. In those days, Leicester machine was the one that was sold throughout India by the British company. So British company, seeing the sales getting reduced in western part of India, they came down to Mumbai and found out the reason. Then they told these people, we pay you royalty, why don't you make machine for ourselves, us? They refused, no, we don't want to do it. Then they said, you have to use your brand name. And that is how brand names like Field Marshal came. So today, Rajkot is perhaps one of the largest industrial centers in the entire world. So this is how entrepreneurship has been growing in the last 60, 70 years, largely driven by the entrepreneurial, neo-business jatis. This is because of the close-knit relationship that they have. They help each other. In every place wherever we went in those days, they used to tell us, sir, I have developed 10 entrepreneurs, 15 entrepreneurs. So these people take pride in saying that we develop our own entrepreneurs. So that is how entrepreneurship grew. And this close relationship help our people to mobilize funds very easily. There was a study by two American professors which appeared in the World Development Report published by World Bank in 2001. The study related to Tirupur. We know Tirupur in India contributes 40% of India's knitted garment exports. Tirupur is a highly successful story. In the 1980s, early 1980s, there was not much export, 1 crore, 2 crore, 85, 15 crores. Today, 37,000 crores. Completely, the business was built by the local people without any help from outside. In fact, if we see the industrial business centers run by jatis, they mobilize funds on their own, not a single dollar worth of foreign direct investment. They mobilize funds on their own. So, in the late 90s, the Westerners, American professors, they had a doubt. How this unknown place from India, Tirupur, is dominating the global textile retail markets for their banians, innerwears, etc. So they came down to Tirupur. They took up the study. They met me also several times. And then they found out the reason for Tirupur emerging as a successful, very successful business center at the global level is their financing method. Their cost of capital was very low compared to the cost of capital of the modern corporations, particularly in the Western countries. How do they mobilize funds? They mobilize funds through their relationships, through their community relationship, jati relationship, and friendly relationships also. So as a result, the study said these people were able to mobilize funds at cheap cost, many times at lower, without any cost also, because export business is a business that has to be completed within the fixed days, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. So when they want funds, immediate funds, they go to their uncle, they go to their cousin, they go to their friend. And this is how they have been mobilizing funds. As a result, they said this community relationship help these Tirupur people to mobilize funds at very cheap cost so that they are able to finally fix a very cheaper price at the international market. Not only that, our people across the country, we have seen, they develop their own mechanisms native financial mechanisms. In this connection, I remember in the southern part of Tamil Nadu, when people were starving for funds in the 1950s and 60s, they developed their own system called Mahamai. Mahamai. They go before the Amman deity, take a vow that each of their men will contribute half a paise out of every 1 rupee to the common pool of funds. And that is how they created this system, as a result of which today they are one of the largest trading communities in South India. Not only that, they promoted a very successful bank called Tamil Nadu Mercantile Bank, which was once upon a time Asia's largest profit-making firm. So this is how our people develop their own mechanism. They have the innate capacity. Similarly, we have seen that innovations taking place at the ground level through the community efforts. There is a place called Tiruchengodu in Tamil Nadu, which is even today dominating the coal brick industry. They may have a share of 70 to 80%. At one point of time, more than 90%. So when these people expanded their business, they came to know that they can dig the earth, but they cannot go below the sea and dig the land. So they tried for that, and finally they succeeded. So now they go below the sea and then dig the earth. So they invented machines for that. Not only that, they have expanded their business in African countries. Today, they are dominating those markets. So this is how entrepreneurship, funding mechanisms, innovations are taking place through jatis. Not just this. As far as social development, social progress is concerned, they play a very, very important role. We have seen in many places how jatis join together and then promote businesses, do it very successfully, not in the individual name, but in the name of the jati. In one particular village in Tamil Nadu, in the southern region, a particular jati, they have a cinema theater, they have a saloon, they have all public consuming centers, sales centers, run by jatis combinedly, not by individuals, and they are doing it in a very perfect manner. So this is how our jatis function. And we have also seen that some of the jatis that we have not studied in detail are following our civilizational dharma in a very excellent way. We don't even notice it. After the tsunami struck in 2004 December, we visited the coastal regions of Tamil Nadu 2005 January, from Chennai to up to Thoothukudi. In those regions, only the Hindu fishermen community are there. When we went there, we came to know that they have a close-knit system that they have been following. What our Dharampal ji used to mention, even in the Rediscovering India, he mentions about Samudayam villages. But there, completely community-driven governance system is there. So in the community-driven governance system, all of them sit every month once on a particular day, take all decisions. Even though the government-run panchayat system is also there, but it is this system that they run very successfully. And for this system, they elect a president as their leader based on the merit of a person, based on the character of the person, based on the good conduct of the person. As a result, you will be surprised to know there are no divorces in their houses, no man-woman relationship. You will be surprised to know, I don't have time, otherwise I would have explained to you. In some of the villages, they have 2 or 3 vacant houses. So whenever there is a problem in a particular family between, let us say, daughter-in-law and mother-in-law, then the old parents can go and live there in that village, vacant house. The entire expenses will be borne by the village. It could be for 3 months, 6 months, or even 1 year. And that is how they maintain the system. Every day, those fishermen go into the sea at 3 o'clock in the morning. Before going into the sea, they visit the Amman temple. In all these villages, they have big Amman deities. They go pray there and then only enter the seas. But before leaving their houses for Amman temple, they touch the feet of their elderly women in their houses, mothers, grandmothers, etc. So when I asked them, let us assume if mother is not there in your house, grandmother is not there in your house, what will you do? Immediately they replied, sir, we will touch our wife's feet, sir. This is what we are doing every day. So this is how they maintain, give respect to the women. So this is how jatis are functioning at an extremely positive way in the social level also. So from whatever we have studied in the last 27, 28 years, based on the suggestions of Dharampal ji and other intellectuals like Gurumurthy ji, we observe that today, to a very large extent, the economic and business development of India in the last 60, 70 years is largely driven by the communities. Communities, even today, they have discipline. When we say communities within, and in the Bharatiya Hindu system, we don't discriminate. Whenever other religious communities are there, we have noted this in many places. I myself have studied it in Tamil Nadu, other places, Dindigul, Kanpur, where other religious communities are also there. They are also treated as brothers and sisters, no discrimination. But jatis have they are playing a very important role even today at the economic and social level. It is time for us to revitalize them. Now, to an extent, we have rediscovered. It is time for us to revitalize them, as suggested by Shri Dharampalji. And in our own way, little way, we are trying to do it wherever possible. And I appeal through this platform to all of you, let us all join together in this effort. Because jati is today considered as something very wrong, backward, but they play a very positive role at the economic and social levels. This we have to understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kanak Sawatiji, for these wonderful remarks. I request members of the audience to type their questions in the chat box if you wish to ask anything from Professor, and I can also maybe ask one question in the meantime. So, sir, Dharampal ji stayed for long periods in Chennai. Do you think that was because he wanted to study the role of jatis there in Tamil Nadu, or what do you think was the reason?
In fact, he was, as far as I know, concentrating on different issues, and he was mentoring people like me also. So when he came to know that in those days much of my work was related to this industrial business, agricultural centers, with regard to communities also, he specifically asked me to study these communities. And after that, whenever we meet, we used to have long interactions. I remember when he visited the Aryavaiti pharmacy, Coimbatore, he was staying there for 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We used to have a long discussion. He used to ask me the development findings, etc. And then he used to give advice to me. Most of the time, Shri Mechal Danino was used to be with me. So as far as I know, he was involved in many activities. He was a great thinker, and but he particularly asked some of me to concentrate on this particular aspect also. So that is how I got more interested to study this. And today I feel that the jati as a system, it's a well-established system. Of course, there are some limitations due to various reasons, but jatis, I feel, have a very positive role to play. They are playing even today in economics and to a large extent in the social systems also. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Our colleagues are very happy to hear you. There, Harsh Satya ji is saying that it's a very profound point that India's economic growth is credited to jatis and their social capital. Maybe can we take up one question if you have time?
Yes.
Okay. So this question is from Shikha. She's asking, what will be your suggestion for anthropologists who are trying to understand the lifestyle of particular communities what are the things that they should keep in their mind? Because normally it is the Western approach that they adopt while they are doing the research.
See, the first and important point is they have to take up field studies without any bias. Some of us, we are also educated in the same system, but we came to understand India or rediscover India only when we started studying India from our native Bharatiya perspectives. So the first thing that we have to do as teachers, scholars, students is to take up field studies. You go without any bias to the field, take up studies, then you will understand, begin to understand. So I feel that, particularly in the field of social sciences, all the scholars from different fields, whether it is economics, business, sociology, anthropology, they have to go to the field and take up studies. You know, Gurumukhi often says that society is the open air university. So when we go and see the functioning system, then we will realize. So please take up field studies. Some of us, we are here to help you. In fact, we need more and more people to take up such studies because India is such a vast country and we have to change the narrative about India. This is a great nation. You know, we have enormous strengths, and this we can prove only when we take up field studies. Thank you. Thank you, my dear.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Yes. We have more questions, but I think you have to.
Yes, yes,
so,
yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you so
It's
much.
my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I will now move to the next speaker. The speaker is Shrimati Indumati Kardare ji. नमस्कार नमस्कार इंदुमती जी, कैसे हैं आप?
नमस्कार
नमस्कार नमस्कार। इंदुमती जी को का तो परिचय की कोई आवश्यकता ही नहीं है। वो बहुत लंबे समय से पुनरुत्थान विद्यापीठ गुजरात में जो स्थापित है उसका संचालन कर रही हैं और धर्मपाल जी का जो समग्र ग्रंथ है I think okay, I think it was कोई डिस्टर्बेंस आ गई थी। पुनरुत्थान विद्यापीठ गुजरात अहमदाबाद में स्थित है और इसका संचालन श्रीमती इंदुमती काटदारे जी बहुत लंबे समय से कर रही हैं। धर्मपाल जी का समग्र लेखन और ग्रंथ अंग्रेजी भाषा में थे और इनका अनुवाद गुजराती और हिंदी भाषा में इंदुमती काटदारे जी द्वारा हुआ है। पुनरुत्थान विद्यापीठ पुनरुत्थान ट्रस्ट अहमदाबाद ने प्रकाशित किया है इन दो भागों में, दो खंडों में धर्मपाल जी के ग्रंथों को। और इतना ही नहीं, पुनरुत्थान विद्यापीठ ने कई सारे विषयों पर शिक्षा के क्षेत्र में, संस्कृति के क्षेत्र में बहुत सारे लेख प्रकाशित किए हैं और इंदुमती जी इस बारे में बहुत उन्होंने बहुत लंबे समय से इसमें कार्य कर रही हैं। तो ज्यादा समय ना लेते हुए मैं आमंत्रित करना चाहता हूँ श्रीमती इंदुमती काटदारे जी को। आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है हमारे कार्यक्रम में और हम आपके आभारी हैं कि आप यहाँ पे आए और आपने अपना समय निकाला। आप अपना प्लीज आप वक्तव्य दीजिए।
जी अंकुर जी, कितना समय है मेरे लिए?
जी, आपके लिए लगभग 20 मिनट है।
ठीक। धर्मपाल जी के इस शताब्दी समारोह के समापन के अवसर पर इस कार्यक्रम में उपस्थित सर्व विद्वजन मान्यवर सबको नमस्कार। ये समारोह जब शुरू हुआ 24 जुलाई को, तब से मुझे इस कार्यक्रम में सहभागी होने की बहुत इच्छा थी। उद्घाटन कार्यक्रम ठीक व्यास पूर्णिमा के दिन ही था और वह पुनरुत्थान विद्यापीठ का स्थापना दिन है, इसलिए मैं उसमें उपस्थित नहीं हो पाई। शेष समय में भी मैं एक इतने बड़े प्रोजेक्ट के साथ जुड़ी हुई हूँ, इसलिए समय निकालना बहुत कठिन हो रहा था। आज के कार्यक्रम का जब समाचार मिला तो मुझे लगा कि अब इस अवसर को तो नहीं छोड़ना चाहिए, इसलिए मेरा सौभाग्य मानती हूँ कि आज इस कार्यक्रम में मैं उपस्थित रह सकती हूँ। धर्मपाल जी के साहित्य का जब अनुवाद का कार्य चल रहा था, उसके पहले भी, उसके दौरान भी और उसके बाद भी जो अध्ययन का अवसर मिला था, पढ़ने का अवसर मिला था, उसके बाद से एक विचार श्रृंखला शुरू हुई। उसके पहले भी मैं जिस संगठन के साथ जुड़ी हुई हूँ, उसमें भारत, भारतीयता, भारत बोध और भारत की पुनः प्रतिष्ठा, ये विषय केंद्रवर्ती विषय हैं। इसलिए धर्मपाल जी के साहित्य का अध्ययन उस विचार में बहुत ही अच्छा मेल स्थापित करने वाला हुआ। उसके बाद तो ये निश्चय हुआ कि यह साहित्य अंग्रेजी में होने के कारण से देश के अधिकांश लोग, विचारवान लोग, जानकार लोग, भारत को चाहने वाले लोग भी इसे पढ़ नहीं पाते, इसलिए भारत की भाषा में इसका अनुवाद होना चाहिए। और ऐसे शुरू हुआ यह कार्य, तो पहले गुजराती में, बाद में हिंदी में और अभी मराठी में भी उसका अनुवाद हुआ है। यद्यपि हमने उसे प्रकाशित नहीं किया है, तो भी मराठी में भी वह उपलब्ध है। आज के कार्यक्रम के संदर्भ में मुझे बहुत संक्षेप में 3-4 बिंदु बताने की आवश्यकता लगती है। पहला तो यह साहित्य है, वह यदि भारत की सभी भाषाओं में उपलब्ध होता है तो वह बहुत ही अच्छा होगा। अतः किसी न किसी प्रकार से जो लोग इस काम में जुड़े हैं, उन्होंने इस विचार को प्रमोट करना चाहिए। यह कैसे आगे बढ़े, यह भी देखना चाहिए। दूसरा है वैचारिक पक्ष। अब धर्मपाल जी के साहित्य के अध्ययन के समय हम उनके साथ साथ उनके पद चिन्हों पर चले। जहां उनके पद चिन्ह रुक गए, वहां से हमें दिशा समझ करके उस पद चिन्हों से जो संकेत प्राप्त होते हैं, उस पर आगे चलने का काम करना चाहिए। हमारा बड़ा ही ये सौभाग्यपूर्ण संकेत है कि इस कार्यक्रम का आयोजन जो 2 संस्थाएं कर रही हैं, वे भारतीय अध्ययन विचार के साथ संबंधित हैं। एक है गांधी रिसर्च फाउंडेशन, वह भी अनुसंधान के क्षेत्र में कार्य कर रही है। दूसरा है इंडस यूनिवर्सिटी और उसका इंडिक स्टडी सेंटर, वो भारत के विषय में ही अध्ययन करने वाला केंद्र है। अतः हमें कुछ बातों पर विचार करना चाहिए। हमें जो आगे कार्य करना है, धर्मपाल जी की दिशा को पकड़ते हुए और उस दिशा में आगे बढ़ना है, तो हमें 3 बातों पर ध्यान देना चाहिए। ये 3 हमारे यूनिवर्सिटी के अध्ययन अनुसंधान के पक्ष के साथ ही जुड़े हैं, ऐसा मैं मानती हूँ। एक है उसका इंटेलेक्चुअल पक्ष, बौद्धिक पक्ष। दूसरा है साइकोलॉजिकल डायमेंशन अर्थात मानसिक पक्ष, और तीसरा है व्यावहारिक पक्ष, व्यवहार में जो करने की आवश्यकता है। और वे तीनों एक साथ विचार में भी आने चाहिए और क्रियान्वयन में भी आने चाहिए। उसमें सबसे महत्वपूर्ण मैं मानती हूँ साइकोलॉजिकल पक्ष। ब्रिटिशों के 200 वर्ष के आधिपत्य के दौरान, उसके पहले 100 वर्ष उनकी दिशा तो इसी तरफ जा रही थी, और उसके पहले लगभग 700-800 वर्ष भारत विदेशी आक्रमणों का शिकार होता आया है। इस लंबे संघर्ष के दौरान ब्रिटिशों के आधिपत्य ने हमारा मनोवैज्ञानिक पद्धति से, मानसिक रूप से बहुत नुकसान किया है। हम कह सकते हैं कि हम इन ए वे suffering from the great grand national inferiority complex। हमारा मानस जो है वह इतना हीनता बोध से ग्रस्त हो गया है कि हमको लगता है we equate modernity with westernization। Modernization is not westernization, this is conceptually wrong। ये तो वैचारिक रूप से ये सत्य नहीं है, परंतु साइकोलॉजिकली, मानसिक रूप से हमने मॉडर्नाइजेशन को वेस्टर्नाइजेशन के साथ आइडेंटिफाई कर लिया है। हमें इस कंसेप्ट से मुक्त होकर भारतीय पद्धति से आधुनिक और आधुनिकतम हो सकता है, इस विचार को अधिक अच्छी तरह से समझने की आवश्यकता है। जीवन के छोटे से छोटे पक्ष को लेकर बड़े से बड़े पक्ष में हमें अपने आप को मानसिक रूप से मुक्त करने की आवश्यकता है। हीनता बोध से जो हम ग्रस्त हो गए हैं, उससे मुक्त होने की आवश्यकता है। भारत बोध तो तभी होगा, हम कहते हैं भारत का पुनर्बोध, रीडिस्कवरिंग इंडिया। तो भारत का बोध प्राप्त करने के लिए हमारे मानस मुक्त होने चाहिए। अब किस प्रकार से हम मुक्त नहीं है, इसका बहुत लंबा चौड़ा वर्णन करने की न तो आवश्यकता है न तो अभी समय है, परंतु हम अपने आप को केवल भारतीय हैं इसलिए पुराणपंथी हैं ऐसा मानने से मुक्त नहीं हुए हैं, नहीं हो रहे हैं। We are talking about India, we are talking about traditions, but they are traditions, not modernity। वो तो ट्रेडिशनल है, मॉडर्न नहीं है। ऐसी हमारी मानसिक उलझन बहुत है। तो पहला काम हमें हीनता बोध से की ग्रंथि से मुक्त कैसे हो, इस पर काम करने की आवश्यकता है। इसके लिए साइकोलॉजिकल उपाय करने की तो बहुत आवश्यकता है, परंतु जब हम अध्ययन और अनुसंधान के क्षेत्र में जुड़े हुए लोग हैं तो इंटेलेक्चुअली भी देखना चाहिए। इंटेलेक्चुअली जब हमको देखना है तो दो भाग हैं। एक डिटेल जो अभी कनक सभापति जी ने किया, आर्थिक क्षेत्र, एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप, जाति संस्था और उनके द्वारा जो भारत की आर्थिक समृद्धि अभी भी सुरक्षित रही है, ये डिटेलिंग है, ये जानना है। तो धर्मपाल जी के साहित्य में साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी के बारे में, एजुकेशन के बारे में, पंचायत राज के बारे में, सोशल सिस्टम्स के बारे में बहुत सारी जानकारी उपलब्ध है, परंतु जानकारी के साथ साथ प्रक्रिया को भी जानना है, जानना चाहिए कि किस प्रक्रिया से हमारी सारी सिस्टम का नाश हुआ है। उस प्रक्रिया के पीछे मोटिव्स क्या थे, ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या थे, क्यों ऐसा किया? सब केवल लूट करने के लिए किया, हमारे पर आधिपत्य जमाने के लिए किया, हमें नष्ट करने के लिए किया, हमें सैकड़ों वर्ष तक गुलाम बनाने की दृष्टि से किया। क्यों किया? तो ये ऑब्जेक्टिव जानना, प्रक्रिया जानना, परिणाम जानना, और फिर भी हम बच्चे क्यों रहे? ऑस्ट्रेलिया है, यूएस है, ये तो सब बदल गए, सब यूरोपियन बन गए, हम क्यों नहीं बन गए? इस सारी प्रक्रिया को जानना ये दूसरा पक्ष है। तो हमारे अनुसंधान के विषय, हमारे अध्ययन के विषय ये होने चाहिए कि ऐसी कौन सी प्रक्रिया हुई कि जिसके परिणाम स्वरूप हमारी सारी सिस्टम्स नष्ट हो गई और अब भी हम उससे उबर नहीं रहे हैं। तो पहला मुद्दा हुआ जानकारी, दूसरा मुद्दा है प्रक्रियाओं के विषय में उसका आकलन, प्रक्रियाओं को समझना, और तीसरा मुद्दा है हम भारतीय हैं। तो जैसे चित्त, मानस और काल में धर्मपाल जी ने संकेत दिए हैं, हम क्या हैं, हम कौन हैं, हम कैसे हैं, जीवन और जगत को देखने की हमारी दृष्टि कौन सी है और वह विशिष्ट कैसे है, वह यूरो अमेरिकी दृष्टि से कैसे अलग है. I think we can go into the comparative studies also कि ये यूरो अमेरिकी दृष्टि कौन सी, जीवन और जगत को देखने की दृष्टि, यह जीवन कैसे अस्तित्व में आया, यह जगत कैसे बना है, जगत और जीवन का संबंध क्या है, हमारी विरासत क्या है. ये केवल फिलोसॉफिकल नहीं है, ये स्पिरिचुअल है. तो स्पिरिचुअल का हम क्या समझते हैं, स्पिरिचुअल का अर्थ नो, आज एक बहुत बड़ा कंसेप्चुअल फील्ड में, डोमेन में हमारे लिए संकट है कि हम सारी भारतीय संकल्पनाओं को अंग्रेजी कंसेप्चुअल वर्ड के माध्यम से ही समझते हैं, तो हमारा इंटरप्रिटेशन भी अंग्रेजी हो जाता है. आजकल अप्रोप्रिएशन ऑफ नॉलेज का बहुत बड़ा काम यूरोप और अमेरिका में चल रहा है और अनअवेयरली या अवेयरनेस के साथ वी आर कंट्रीब्यूटिंग टू इट. तो सबसे पहला है भारतीय दृष्टि स्पष्ट होना, विजन क्लियर होना, ये पहली आवश्यकता है. मुझे लगता है कि भारत में जितना भी रिसर्च चल रहा है और वो भी नॉलेजेबल रिसर्च चल रहा है, भारत में जितना भी हायर एजुकेशन चल रहा है, उसके अधिष्ठान के स्वरूप हमें जीवन और जगत को देखने की भारतीय दृष्टि विकसित करनी चाहिए, स्थापित करनी चाहिए. और भारतीय दृष्टि से भारत को समझना, भारतीय दृष्टि से भारतीय ज्ञान को समझना, भारत की दृष्टि से भारतीय परंपराओं को समझना, भारतीय दृष्टि से भारत की व्यवस्थाओं को समझना, भारतीय दृष्टि से आज जिनको हम कंसेप्ट कह रहे हैं उनको भी समझना. ये दिस शुड बी द फाउंडेशन ऑफ ऑल नॉलेजेबल रिसर्च एंड हायर एजुकेशन गोइंग ऑन इन ऑल अवर यूनिवर्सिटीज ऑफ इंडिया. देश की यूनिवर्सिटीज में ये चलना चाहिए. अब आज राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति घोषित हुए, उसमें इंडियन नॉलेज सिस्टम का एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण विभाग है और इधर इंडस यूनिवर्सिटी का इंडिक स्टडी सेंटर है. दोनों के लिए ये भारतीय दृष्टि का अधिष्ठान होना, इस दृष्टि से अध्ययन करना अत्यंत आवश्यक है. इसी से हमारा साइकोलॉजिकल मुक्ति होने में बहुत बड़ा कंट्रीब्यूशन इसका होगा. तो नॉलेज, इंटेलेक्ट एंड माइंड, मानस और बुद्धि दोनों साथ साथ जानी चाहिए. मानस से मुक्ति प्राप्त करके हमने अध्ययन करना चाहिए और सही अध्ययन से हमारा मानस भी भारत में स्थापित होना चाहिए. अगर इसके लिए हमें भारतीय दृष्टि से यूरो अमेरिकी जगत का अध्ययन करने की आवश्यकता पड़े तो वह करना चाहिए. और तीसरा बिंदु जो है वह प्रैक्टिकल. कुछ भी जब तक क्रिया के स्तर पर, कृति के स्तर पर हमारा विचार और हमारी बुद्धि, हमारा मानस नहीं उतरता, तब तक व्यवहार में हमें परिणाम तो नहीं मिलते. इसलिए हमें लोक शिक्षा और लोक व्यवहार के लिए यूनिवर्सिटी ने कुछ कार्य योजना बनानी चाहिए. It should not be about it, it should be it. ये हमेशा ध्यान में रखने की आवश्यकता है. इसलिए व्यवहार में वह रूरल इकोनॉमी नहीं है, रूरल सेंटर्ड भारतीय इकोनॉमी है. अब हम साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी के क्षेत्र में हम जानकारी तो प्राप्त करते हैं, जैसे कनक सभापति जी ने कहा बहुत सारी जातियां इसको कैसे बताए हुए हैं, ये भी हम जानते हैं. परंतु मेन स्ट्रीम इकोनॉमी, मेन स्ट्रीम टेक्नोलॉजी की दुनिया, मेन स्ट्रीम साइंस, ये क्या है? ये तो पूरी तरह से मॉडर्न है. मॉडर्न इनटू इन्वर्टेड कॉमा, मॉडर्न गेटिंग इक्वेटेड विद द यूरो अमेरिकी. और फिर उनकी दृष्टि से तो हम टेक्नोलॉजी के क्षेत्र में भारतीय विचार से इतने दूर चले गए हैं कि हमें 3 बातों का विस्मरण हो गया है, हमने त्याग कर दिया है। एक, श्रम प्रतिष्ठा, जो महात्मा गांधी ने प्रतिष्ठित किया, महात्मा गांधी ने विचार दिया, श्रम प्रतिष्ठा। दूसरा, देश की समृद्धि का आधार मटेरियल प्रोडक्शन है, कल्चरल एक्टिविटीज नहीं। ये दूसरा बहुत महत्वपूर्ण भारतीय विचार अर्थशास्त्र के क्षेत्र में है, उत्पादन के क्षेत्र में है और पूर्ण हमारी सिस्टम के क्षेत्र में है। तो दूसरा है मटेरियल प्रोडक्शन और तीसरा है मनुष्य की आर्थिक स्वतंत्रता, व्यक्ति की आर्थिक स्वतंत्रता। हमने आज की टेक्नोलॉजी को मॉडर्न 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 कहकर इस प्रकार से बनाया है कि हमारा देश मजदूरों और नौकरों का देश बन गया है। काम करने वाले की स्वतंत्रता नहीं रही है, काम करने वाले की प्रतिष्ठा नहीं, सम्मान नहीं, काम करवाने वाले की प्रतिष्ठा है। काम करवाने वाला बड़ा है, काम करने वाला छोटा है। दिस इज नॉट इंडियन वे। उत्पादन के क्षेत्र में ये भारतीय पद्धति तो है ही नहीं। तो फिर हम टेक्नोलॉजी का क्या करेंगे? वंडरफुल, बहुत अद्भुत मशीन, यंत्र हमारे यहाँ तो बनते थे, बने हैं, अद्भुत परिणाम भी दिए हैं, हम जानते तो हैं, परंतु आज वह है नहीं, आज वह हो सकता नहीं है। वो जगत का उत्तम स्टील बनाने की पोर्टेबल बत्तियां हमारे यहाँ थी। 50-60 वर्ष पहले उनको बनाने वाले और उसके ऊपर काम करने वाले कारीगर भी हमारे यहाँ थे, आज नहीं है। जो नहीं है उसके बारे में शिकायत करने से कुछ नहीं होता, अफसोस करने से कुछ नहीं होता। हमारी बहुत बड़ी डिजाइन बननी चाहिए पहले कि हम कैसे इसको पुनः ला सके, और उसमें यूनिवर्सिटी का रोल ही सबसे महत्वपूर्ण होना चाहिए, क्योंकि नॉलेज इज द बेसिस फॉर एवरीथिंग इन इंडिया। भारत ज्ञाननिष्ठ देश है और ज्ञान क्षेत्र ने पूरे भारत को धर्म, संस्कृति, मूल्य, नीति और ज्ञान इन सब के विषय में मार्गदर्शन किया है। कैसे व्यवस्था बनाना, कैसे व्यवहार करना, कैसे अध्ययन करना, कैसे उत्पादन करना, यूनिवर्सिटी ने ही बनाया है। नीतियां यूनिवर्सिटी में बनती हैं, शासन में लागू होती हैं। ये जो शिफ्ट है भारतीयता की और जो व्यवहार में जो शिफ्ट है, उसके लिए डिजाइन क्या है, उसके लिए मैकेनिज्म क्या है? ये मैकेनिज्म बुद्धिमान लोगों के मस्तिष्क में पहले आता है, बाद में कागज पर उतरता है और बाद में फील्ड पर, भूमि में उतरता है। प्रारंभ तो उच्च शिक्षा के केंद्रों ने करना चाहिए। श्रेष्ठ समाज के 2 लक्षण होते हैं, एक समृद्धि और दूसरी संस्कृति। दोनों साथ साथ जाना चाहिए, क्योंकि समृद्धि के बिना संस्कृति की रक्षा नहीं होती और संस्कृति के बिना समृद्धि आसुरी बन जाती है। इसलिए हमें सुसंस्कृत, वैभवपूर्ण ऐसे राष्ट्र बनने की आवश्यकता है। जो हजारों वर्ष तक हम रहे हैं वही फिर से बनना है, वही तो भारत का पुनर्बोध है। तो यह बोध हृदय में होता है, मस्तिष्क में होता है, मानस में होता है, हाथ में होता है, पैरों में होता है और फिर व्यक्ति के जीवन के साथ साथ समष्टि के जीवन में वह स्थापित होता है। तभी भी कोई राष्ट्र महान बनता है, कोई राष्ट्र समृद्ध बनता है, कोई राष्ट्र सुसंस्कृत बनता है। भारत में ये सब बनने का पोटेंशियल है। भारत को बनाया ही ईश्वर ने इसलिए है और ऐसा बनकर भारत सारे जगत को हमेशा दिशा दर्शन करता आया है और आज भी कर सकता है। अभी आज के इस समारोह में हम सब मिलकर ये संकल्प कर सकते हैं समापन के समय कि हम इस दिशा में आगे बढ़ेंगे और हमारे देश को जैसा वह हमेशा से रहा है और जैसा वह डिस्टाइन्ड टू बी है, ऐसा हमारी सेवा से, हमारे अध्ययन से, हमारे प्रयासों से पुनः बनेगा। आप सबका मुझे आज इसमें सम्मिलित करने के लिए आभार मानते हुए मेरी बात में पूर्ण करती हूँ। नमस्कार।
धन्यवाद इंदुमती जी, धन्यवाद, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपका। आपने बहुत अच्छे से अपनी बात को हमें हमें हमारे समक्ष रखा और मैं आशा करता हूं कि पुनरुत्थान विद्यापीठ अपना कार्य बहुत विस्तार से इसका प्रचार प्रसार करेगा। और मेरा बस एक यही प्रश्न था कि हम धर्मपाल जी का जो कार्य है उसका ज्यादा विस्तार से प्रचार प्रसार कैसे कर सकते हैं, और आपको क्या लगता है कि एक दो सुझाव क्या हो सकते हैं कि उनका वर्क और ज्यादा हम फैलाएं और ज्यादा हम उसका प्रचार कर पाएं?
जी, पुनरुत्थान विद्यापीठ यह कार्य कर रहा है। अभी हम 1051 पुस्तकें इसे भारत केंद्रित विचार को लेकर, शिक्षा के विभिन्न पहलुओं को लेकर प्रकाशित कर रहे हैं। वह निर्माण हो रहा है और प्रकाशन होगा। हमें उच्च शिक्षा में जितने भी विषय पढ़ाए जा रहे हैं उसका भारतीय स्वरूप क्या है, इस पर अध्ययन करना चाहिए, इस पर अनुसंधान करना चाहिए। विभिन्न विषयों के बोर्ड ऑफ स्टडीज ने मिलकर पाठ्यक्रम बनाने चाहिए, संदर्भ साहित्य एकत्रित करना चाहिए, जो भी आज के लिए आवश्यक है ऐसे बनाने चाहिए। इसके लिए अगर नए पाठ्यक्रम बनाने की आवश्यकता पड़े तो नए पाठ्यक्रम बनाने चाहिए। और दूसरा, पूरे देश के सभी लोगों को ज्ञानवान बनाने के लिए दो काम उच्च शिक्षा के स्तर के लोग कर सकते हैं। एक, उच्च शिक्षा ने नीचे तक की शिक्षा के मेंटर बनना चाहिए, नीचे तक की शिक्षा के रक्षक और पोषक बनना चाहिए, उनको मार्गदर्शक बनना चाहिए, उन्होंने उसको ओन करना चाहिए। और दूसरा है बहुत बड़ा, अगर समाज में व्याप्त होना है तो इस ज्ञान को, इस समझ को, इस आकलन को घर घर तक पहुंचाने की व्यवस्था भी करनी चाहिए। और तीसरा सबसे महत्वपूर्ण है, अर्थशास्त्र इज दी की सब्जेक्ट फॉर इट। हम समृद्ध बनना चाहिए। धर्मानुकूल अर्थशास्त्र अथवा भारतीय अर्थशास्त्र के मूल तत्व, ऐसा करके यदि उत्पादन, वितरण, उपभोग और इन तीनों बातों की धर्मानुकूलता, ऐसा अगर हमने किया तो मुझे लगता है कि हमारी समाज व्यवस्था के भी सारे पक्ष उसमें समाहित हो जाएंगे। शेष तो बहुत अधिक विचार का विषय भी है, चर्चा का विषय भी है।
जी धन्यवाद इंदुमती जी। एक प्रश्न और है निकिता जी का। वो पूछ रही हैं कि आज के समय में हम समृद्धि की तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं लेकिन संस्कृति को पीछे छोड़ रहे हैं, इसके लिए
हाँ।
हम क्या हम समाज को दे सकें? Okay, so I think Indumati ji is maybe she's having some problems in connectivity. So in the meantime, what we can do is let me now introduce the next speaker for today. His name is Dr. Harsh Satya. And Dr. Harsh Satya, we are very delighted to have you here with us today. Thank you for joining us on this important occasion on the concluding session of Dharampal ji's year-long birth centenary celebrations. Dr. Harsh Satya has completed his PhD in humanities from IIIT Hyderabad. He has worked on various traditional Indian knowledge systems, and especially his work has been focused on the Jajmani system in India. And he is currently associated with the Society for Integrated Development in Himalayas in Mussoorie. And with these words, Harshji, I welcome you again on this platform. And I would now like to invite you to please give your speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Ankur. Namaste to everyone. Namaste to Indumati Tai. Namaste to Professor Kanak Stapati. And namaste to Professor Gita Dharampal. Before I share my thoughts, I'd like to confess here that Professor Gita Dharampal has been like a teacher to me. So to make a presentation in front of her is like going back to college and making a presentation in front of the professor. It makes me a little nervous. But I'm thankful to Ankur Bhai for giving me this opportunity to speak. Dear friends and teachers, it is a matter of great joy for me to share my understanding of Dharampal ji, whom I had met only once, but whose writings I have been familiar with for more than a decade. In fact, I would like to say that his writings inspired me to undertake my doctoral work. I strongly feel it must have been some punya in my previous life that I met people like Dharampal and became familiar with their works. I take this opportunity to share with you not only my understanding of Dharampal ji, but more importantly, to seek your indulgence in some of the thoughts that have kept me occupied for last few years. Some of you, like Professor Gita Dharampal, were contemporaries of my teacher, and hence I see you in that light. Friends, as I read this book, Rediscovering India, it struck me that Dharampal ji would not have been the first person to look into the archival records. Yet, what he could unearth, no one else did that. And perhaps even now, many of the scholars who look into the archival material are not able to see what he saw. For a young man like me, who has been familiar with Dharampalji's works, this is one important question. To understand the drishti of Dharampal, what he could see which others could not, and how did that happen? Many of you who may have spent many years with Dharampalji and know him closely would probably attest this. Dharampalji's quest was not to satisfy requirements of a sanctioned research project or to meet the requirements of an academic degree, but he was genuinely concerned about India, about the ordinary people of India. Such concern of India is perhaps rare to witness today. Dharampalji was genuinely seeking some answers, like what happened during the colonial rule that led to the collapse of a functioning society. Indumati Tai just hinted at that in addition to look at the information given by Dharampalji, we must also understand what happened, what processes, what prakriyas happened in the colonial rule, which led to the collapse of a functioning society. I think Dharampalji was obsessed by this question. Also, perhaps Dharampalji also wondered what stops us today from standing up again now that the British has left. There must be something stopping us today to stand up. It's 75 years of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, and we must ponder over this question seriously. Perhaps it was this genuine quest which made Dharampalji an original mind, a term used by Professor Sandong Rinpoche for him at an event in Delhi in December of 2002. As I read through this book carefully, I realized that Dharampalji not only looked at the archival material, but equally important for him was to understand the context of those times, the background of the author, and perhaps most important, to understand the Western lens of perceiving the world and the way the West looked at the colonized people. Pavanji is not here, but he often refers to Dharampalji's awareness not only about that which has been observed, but also who is observing it. Friends, we must remember that disciplines like anthropology and sociology find their origins in Western man's initiative to understand the natives or barbarians. There was a friend who just asked a question to the previous speaker: what must an anthropologist do to understand local communities in India? I would address that towards the end, but I think one of the important things our young anthropologists, sociologist friends should do is to understand the context of these disciplines, the origins of these disciplines. What mandate these disciplines were created from. These are not quote unquote objective in that sense. They had a particular mandate. And as students, we must understand that. Moving on, I think for young men and women like myself, these are important considerations to keep in mind, especially when we read Western literature on India. Many of us often make the mistake of considering Western description of India as objective, and then we make these the basis of our own self image. For example, I recommend to everyone here to find time and look at the debates about India in the British Parliament, and also the correspondence between high officials sitting in London and those sitting in India. In Dharampalji's works, we can find some important examples of these debates. For example, the debate on the Christianization of India in 1813 is an important debate to look at, or the reflection on the Hindus by James Mill in 1817 is an important document to look at, or the famous Macaulay's minutes or the infamous Macaulay's minutes of education of 1835 are important documents to look at. Why I'm saying this is because often what we consider to be an objective assessment of India may not be so. After we see these debates, we would perhaps not make mistake of considering Western literature to be objective on its perception of India. As Dharampalji read through these documents, surely he must have been pained and even very angry. At the same time, it even gave him a deep insight into the working of the Western mind. Dharampalji's understanding of the West was profound. Friends, I believe today our understanding of the West is also not serious enough, nor is our understanding of India. In this regard, Dharampalji was a rare exception. As Dharampalji read through the records and documents available in the archival material, he learnt about important aspects of Indian society towards the end of the 18th century and the early 19th century. This understanding of India must have pleasantly surprised him. He must have been impressed to see the richness of the socio-economic systems in this country, their ability to organize social life without the intervention of or dependence on the state. Details of these are available in his important works, published in the 5 volumes by Goa's Other India Press and Sid Masuri. His unearthing of indigenous education system, the beautiful tree, as he called, in the 18th century, and the system of revenue allocation in the Chingalpet region at that time punctures our belief, our myth of Indian society, and it opens up space for us to rediscover India. In this process, rediscovering India, he perhaps also realized that the educated Indian, people like us, including myself, does not know this country and the ways of ordinary people of India. On the contrary, if I may say with humility, the educated Indian suffers from a false sense of arrogance and of one-upmanship, which perhaps originates from this false understanding of Indian society. Today, many of us find Dharampalji's findings almost unbelievable, almost fictional. Sadly, we do not have any recollection of our past. Everything about our past has been wiped out of our memory, and we have unknowingly imbibed a false narrative. For a young man like myself, developing what my friend Pranav Vashisht from Hyderabad calls a sound sense of past is perhaps of utmost importance and need of the hour. Dharampalji's original mind and keen observation helped him understand the process of destruction and despoliation of Indian society under the colonial rule. And equally important to understand was the manner in which the British perceived Indian society, its people, and their ways, and also the manner in which the British perceived their own ordinary people living in Britain and in Europe. For instance, we must keep in mind that the general perception at that time was that a non Christian society must be uncivilized, must be a barbaric society. It may seem ridiculous to us today, but not to people like Wilberforce, Macaulay, and Bentinck in those times. They saw everything from this lens and were convinced about it. As young Indian readers, we must keep in mind that innocent terms like backwardness, schooling, or even the popular term development find their origins in this sentiment. As my respected friend Chaitra from Bangalore reminds me, the project of secularism finds its origin in the project of Christianization. Rediscovering India is an important book to understand the British mind, their strategies, how India got destroyed, the ramifications of changes brought about by the British knowingly or unknowingly, the shift from a societal system or samajik vyavastha to the system imposed by the state or rajya vyavastha. At a deeper level, the book prepares us to formulate some serious questions that we should be asking ourselves today. We need to challenge the contemporary historical narrative of India and the dating systems it is based upon. I found this assertion in the unpublished notes by Dharampalji. Further, we need to contemplate over the directions of a research that we need to undertake today. All this will go a long way to rejuvenate India once again. As the Nobel Prize winning author Vidyadhar Naipaul said, India is a wounded civilization. We have been suffering from this inflicted wound. Even our high and mighty, though they have learned to deal with this pain by ignoring the root cause and taking pains, what Dharampalji says, to become like them, like the Western society. But this won't do. If India is to become healthy, it has to acknowledge the wound and work towards healing it. Rediscovering of India would help in the diagnosis of this long festering wound and point towards the path to a healthy India. Dharampalji perhaps compared the situation in contemporary India with that in Russia at the collapse of USSR. In 1990, after the collapse of USSR, seven Russian prominent thinkers jointly reprinted the journal Vekhi, or what is called the Landmark in English, which was first published in 1909. Their attempt was to critically review the era of communism in Russia. These authors believed that communist era, which promoted class struggle and social revolution, was catastrophic to Russian society, bringing it into a deadlock. Dharampalji, I believe, thought that such a critical review of colonial era in India must also be done. One cannot think of any sane reason that even after 75 years of transfer of power, we have not made a concerted effort to critically review the 200 years of colonization. To understand the mechanisms that were at play, which led to the collapse of India, is essential for us to devise ways for its revitalization. For instance, while much is discussed about India's fall into a state of terrible poverty, hardly any attention is given to the collapse of Bhikshavritti communities in India. Friends, Bhikshavritti communities were those communities who were engaged with performances of arts like drama, like music, like puppet shows, like paintings, like songs. There were numerous of these communities who would travel from one village to another village, singing songs, telling stories, you know, describing the itihas of our communities. The collapse of these communities in India has not been adequately appreciated, I think. For example, many believe that India was always an agrarian society, a Krishi Pradhan Desh, as Pandit Nehru called it. But we know from Dharampalji's writings and writings of other prominent thinkers that such was not the case, that India was perhaps an industrial society, an Udyog Pradhan Desh, with its contribution to global industrial produce, roughly one third of the industrial produce in the world in the mid 18th century. However, with humility, I would like to say that perhaps India was a Kala Pradhan Sabhyata, or in other words, a Dharmic society. As Indumati Tai just mentioned, that our concerns of utpadan, production, of distribution, vitran, and of upyog, consumption, were according to the dharma. I remember reading somewhere that Mahatma Gandhi writes in Harijan in 1930, I think, that the biggest problem of India is that it has become dharma bhrasht. Bharat dharm bhrasht ho gaya hai is the biggest problem of India. I think to look at India from this lens, it may be very important to look at India as a Kala Pradhan Sabhyata and to re engage with our many numerous Bhikshavitti communities. After listening to Guruji Rabindra Sharma of Adilabad and then rereading Dharampalji, I find that such a possibility can be explored. In this context, I find Dharampalji's Bhartiya Chit Manas or Kal an essential read for rediscovering India. Much of his work was successful in puncturing an image of India that was static and frozen in time. But the tool he used was the Western method of archival research, which conforms to the Western idea of history. However, I think with Bhartiya Chit Manas or Kal, Dharampalji made an attempt to transform our drishti from the drishti of archival history to the drishti of itihas. I'm making a deliberate distinction between the enterprise of history and the enterprise of itihas here. I think this booklet, a small booklet of 60 odd pages, was Dharampalji's attempt towards a paradigm shift. I think rediscovery of India would begin by correcting the false historical narrative of India that we carry today. But ultimately, it would need to jump from the paradigm of history to that of itihas. And in this regard, to rediscover the mahima of Bhikshavritti communities in India can prove to be an important step. A friend asked to the previous speaker, how should an anthropologist approach a local community? I think one of the important things our young friends should do is to approach the Bhikshavritti communities of the corresponding community we want to study. So if I want to study a local Kumhar, a pottery community in an area, I must begin my search by approaching the corresponding Bhikshavritti of that community. They are the best source for me to learn about this Kumhar community. Dear friends, thank you for your time and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Harshji. It was wonderful. I think you summed up very briefly and very succinctly all the various important threads that we all know about. And I would now request members of the audience to ask their questions. Please type them in the chat box. We can take them up one by one. You can also address questions to other speakers. Please feel free. And if you want, you can also unmute yourself if you are able to do that. And in the meantime, I can maybe begin by asking one question. So Harshji, you were mentioning that Dharampal ji discovered, he was talking about Ravindra Sharma ji, Guruji also, and it was Guruji who introduced Dharampal ji also to a lot of people. You were also probably one among them. In what way do you think Dharampal ji and Ravindra Sharma Guruji were similar or they were different? And what did you learn from each? I know it's a very big question, but maybe you can summarize it for us.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if I'm in a position to talk about the relationship between Guruji Ravindra Sharma and Dharampal ji, but I can say what I have learned by putting them together and reading them together. I think Dharampalji's work was successful in puncturing India's image of a society which is frozen in time. But his work came from archival research. I think what Dharampalji valued in Guruji Ravindra Sharma was that his entire description of Indian society came from his own native understanding of Indian society. Guruji Ravindra Sharma was not influenced in any way by Western literature. Whatever he described of the Indian society was what he saw in his childhood, in his young age. And I think that is what impressed Dharampalji quite a lot about Guruji Ravindra Sharma.
Okay, okay.
I mean, I'm saying this because for educated people like us, we need to do two steps. First, we need to decondition ourselves from the Western literature we have read, and then we have to learn about the Indian society. For Guruji Ravindra Sharma, that first step was already taken care of. He learned about the Indian society directly.
Yeah, so he did not have to unlearn and decondition himself like
Yes.
us. Right,
Yes.
right. Yes, I think that's a very important point. Thank you, Harshji.
Yes, I have a question to ask Harsh. First, I would like to congratulate him on his presentation, and it was a very reflective talk that was giving us an idea of his path of learning. I think this is very important. And since Harsh, you have been intimately involved with the reprint of Rediscovering India. You've read all the essays, I mean, the text probably better than anybody else. And I would like your opinion on how one, this kind of these kind of essays, the talks that my father gave during the period of, say, from the 80s onwards, maybe slightly before that as well. These perhaps similar views of Indian society, of the problems that we face today, are important. Do you think it is possible for some person with an original mind like my father's, that he could review and critically review the issues that face us today? How would one, because this in a way would be taking forward the legacy of Dharampalji, how do you think one could do this? What aspects do we need to focus on? If you could elaborate upon that, I think it would be of interest to the present audience, and would perhaps be also a project that we could take forward in the next few years or decade. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Vitaji. I hope I'm not giving a test here, but I thought Dharampalji's Bharatiya Chitmanas Kal tells us that there's a need to take a departure from the way we are trained to look at even the contemporary India. I don't know if Dharampalji, I don't know how much Dharampalji himself understood the Bharatiya Chitmanas Kal, but I think he was convinced that unless we do that, we cannot reimagine India. We cannot revitalize India. I think it is in that book itself that he mentions that we must make some workable ecosystems for us to just stand and not worry much about the details. We can always take care of the details later, but let us just make some workable Bharatiya ecosystem, if I can say it like that, for an ordinary people to, stand and keep working. In fact, after listening to Professor Kanaka Sthapatiji's presentation today, I thought the Jatis have themselves found some ways of establishing economic entrepreneurship, and understanding these can go a long way for us to establish a workable Bharatiya economic system to begin with. That's how I see a possible departure we can take from the way we are accustomed to looking at India and imagining India's future.
Thank you, Harshi. Yeah, very, very well put, I think.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Harsh.
Thank you, Geetaji.
So I think we are now approaching the close of this webinar, and we are about to conclude this concluding session, the concluding webinar of this year-long webathon that marked the birth centenary celebrations of Shri Dharampal ji. Before I conclude, I would like to invite Professor Geeta Dharampal ji again to make her concluding remarks on not only about today's session, but about the whole year-long webathon in general, and the impressions that she has gathered from all these 10 or 11 sessions that have been conducted so far. I really warmly welcome Professor Geeta Dharampal ji to make her concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ankur, for allowing me to say just a very few words, because I have another commitment. I mentioned at the beginning that I have to leave at 12, so this will be very brief. I would like to thank you especially, and the CIS in general, and Dr. Ram Sharma for hosting this year-long webathon. I think it has been really a worthwhile enterprise. A number of people from different walks of life have contributed as speakers. We have had members, people from different interest groups in the audience, young and old, participating. So I think Dharampal ji's contribution during his long life has become more well known to more sections of the population. So I feel that we have done what we could do, especially in this online mode of communication. I think however, we need to continue with this work. And I would say that Dharampal ji's contributions need to become more accessible in a vernacular sense, in regional languages, written more simply. We need to have perhaps small brochures produced that are accessible, perhaps in story form for school children, about the way Indian society was functioning not that long ago. Just a few 150, 200 years ago, and what is still available among the kala, the Bhikshu Briti, that groups that Harsh was talking about. I think we need to become more familiar with our own society, with the ordinary people in our own society, because they have great wealth. And this is what Dharampal ji himself saw. He felt that we need to involve the ordinary people in the nation building process in all spheres. And this can happen. I mean, it should happen in a democracy anyway, but I think probably a wrong base, a foundation was laid soon after independence, where the emphasis was on the elites, on the big industries, where the real scientists, the grassroots scientists of India, were not allowed to participate actively, to contribute with their own knowledge to the understanding of the functioning of science at the grassroots, which they were doing in the previous centuries. And one could have integrated their technical scientific knowledge into the building of science, scientific enterprise, to make it more indigenously viable. So I think we need to work on different levels. The work that was done, that has been published by Dharampalji, needs to be made more accessible. But we also need to show or to be inspired by his approach and to be more, to interact more with the ordinary people of our society, and to appreciate their understanding, not just talk about it, but to really engage with them, to try and learn. We don't have to tell them, how to, like NGOs tell them how to develop things, how to make toilets and that sort of stuff. We need to learn from them. And maybe we can facilitate certain improvements, but we have to be the learners at the learning end. Maybe first we have to unlearn. And I would say that this is something that is perhaps the most enduring contribution of Dharampalji, that we need to interact together as a people. We need to really appreciate the ordinary people, the contributions that they've done in the past, and give them confidence that they can still do this. Because if they are just working as laborers, rather than as people who have vidya in them and knowledge in them, and contribute through their knowledge to the development of India, they will dry up. But they still have this great knowledge and inspiration, and I think they need to be integrated more fully into our society. And so I think the Center for Indian Studies at Indus University, Ahmedabad, could be involved in this project. Together with the Gandhi Research Foundation, we are trying to work along these lines, and also with SID in Mussoorie. I think there is a lot to do, and perhaps also the audience who have been listening to us today will have something to contribute. I thank you all very, very much, especially to the speakers today, and of course to you at CIS for hosting this very worthwhile seminar. I hope you will say some concluding words. I'll just leave a short comment in the chat box with my email so that people can be in touch if they would like to. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Geeta Dharampalji, for these concluding remarks. And thank you so much for your wonderful and unstinted support all along. This would not have been possible without your support and your encouragement for us to celebrate the birth centenary of Shri Dharampalji. I think it's an honor for us, it's an honor and a privilege to have you with us, and to have you organize this whole program. I would also like to announce now that the Center for Indic Studies is soon going to launch a short online course on Dharampalji, and we look forward to collaborating with other institutions also as part of this course. We will be talking about the various publications of Dharampalji. We'll be conducting lectures and organizing workshops on Dharampalji's works in order to further disseminate his teachings and his publications. So we'll announce the launch of that course perhaps in a couple of months from now. We are in the process of preparing that outline, the course outline. It will be an online course, and Geeta Dharampalji will be also conducting some lectures as part of this course. So with these words, I thank all of you once again for being so patient all along, and for being wonderful members of the audience, and for listening to our program, and for participating in this year-long webathon. This has really been like a festival for us for 1 year, and we have celebrated the work of perhaps one of India's most original thinkers in the last century, I would say, Shri Dharampalji, whose dates are 1922 to 2006. I do hope that each of us is able to carry forward Dharampalji's legacy in whatever capacity we have. And I really look forward to working with all of you and to collaborating further on various fronts. Thank you so much, Harshri, especially for coming and taking out your time and for speaking to us. I thank everyone in the audience. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.